Breaking news out of the NBA where the Magic have made a decision and fired their head coach Jamahl Mosley after 5 seasons. Orlando was knocked out of the postseason just yesterday by the Pistons last night in a Game 7 after blowing a 3-1 series lead. That's happened before in the organization. Mosley made the playoffs 3 times during his tenure with the Magic, but failed to advance past the first round. Orlando has not advanced to the second round. You got to go back to 2010, but take a look at it under the stewardship of Mosley. There you see it dating back to 2022 when he was trying to turn it around. Obviously 22 wins, 34, then got into contention in 2024, but 3 L's when it comes to the first round in back-to-back-to-back years for Mosley and the Magic. All right, for more of that breaking news, Ashley Nicole Mawson here with us, and this is something that maybe has been brewing even before this, to the point where early in the regular season people were questioning the Magic and maybe not playing up to the 4 seed we thought, but now the writing on the wall, Mosley out. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all knew that this was going to happen unless the Orlando Magic took down the Detroit Pistons. I was saying to Zach, who, if you guys didn't know, is an Orlando Magic fan, depends on the day when the Hornets aren't playing, but I digress. We knew that this was going to happen unless they took down a #1 seed. I believe if they beat the Detroit Pistons, it saves Jamahl Mosley's job because they weren't even supposed to be in that position in the first place, given how their season kind of went, right? But it's hard for me to put the sole blame on him for the shortcomings of the Orlando Magic for a multitude of reasons. I think, for one, the team wasn't healthy. That's not the coach's fault. That is just a byproduct of playing a competitive sport for 82 games, is that there will be injuries, and it's up to the coach to make do or make good with what he has at his disposal, right? So the injuries are not on Jamahl Mosley. Now, I also believe the development or lack thereof of Paolo Banchero is not on Jamahl Mosley. That is what Paolo has to work on in the offseason to get better, to add different aspects to his game. You can't force that upon a player. He has to take that initiative among himself to get better and to enhance his game and to become the player that a lot of us have expected Paolo to be at this stage, this tenure in his career. Now, what is on Jamahl Mosley, though, I think, is a lot of the offensive woes that we have kind of seen the Orlando Magic go through. And that is just poor adjustments or lack thereof, not really calling timeouts in the right moments. I think there were a lot of moments, particularly in this series, where you can see the Orlando Magic as a team are playing frantic, they're playing frazzled, and you don't call the timeout and reset your team. You don't call the timeout and put your team in a scenario to be better offensively. And I think that that is on the burden of the coach. I also think that, look, the Orlando Magic have not been able to get over that hump of kind of mediocrity. They've been a middle-of-the-road team since he has been there, and in part that's because of the lack there of development of certain players, the injuries of certain players, but also you have to look at a coach. If you can't continue to get us over the hump, and we have a relatively talented roster. I mean, we saw that the Orlando Magic were not playing like the seed that they ended up in at the end of the regular season, because they are a better team than what is out there during the regular season. You have to also look at the coach. But look, let's call a spade here. Jamahl Mosley isn't the reason that those guys missed 23 shots.
Right.
Jamahl Mosley isn't the reason that the guys couldn't make a basket on the floor. He's not the reason that down the stretch, given the scheme that was put into place, nobody can make a shot. That's something you have to look at from a roster standpoint and from a building standpoint. But unfortunately, when you look at what the tenure, especially this particular season, the reports that Jamahl Mosley has lost the locker room, the contention between him and Paolo Banchero, it was expected that if the Orlando Magic lost, that he would be the first domino to fall. Is it 100% fair? No. Are all the issues of the Orlando Magic on Jamahl Mosley? No. But 9 times out of 10, if there's a change that's going to be made, it is always going to be the head coach before it's anything else.
Yeah, so many ways to take this conversation, because you look at a Magic team that was supposed to be a lot better this year, and now you move forward without Mosley. The Magic keeping their head decision makers, though, because the statement being put out by President of Basketball Operations Jeff Weltman, he said today, "We're grateful to Jamahl Mosley for all he's done for the Orlando Magic. We appreciate his leadership and the positive contributions he made as head coach. While this decision was a difficult one, we feel it's time for a new voice and fresh perspective. We wish Jamahl and his family nothing but the best." So that's coming from the president of basketball ops, Jeff Weltman, who reportedly signed a contract extension during the regular season, which was a struggling regular season. He's the one who made the decision to trade for Desmond Bane to give away 4 first-round picks that constructed this roster as is. But you look at this roster, and Paolo Banchero said yesterday, we're obviously not good enough to be able to compete in the NBA because we've lost 3 times in a row in the first round. You see this roster. Do you think that it is good enough to compete, or should there be more changes at the top because the way the team is constructed, it's not good enough?
It's a few things. I think that, the Orlando Magic have a very stagnant half-court offense that was glaring, especially in this series against the Detroit Pistons, right? And it was mostly glaring in Game 6 and Game 7. And during the regular season, if you look at their stats, they ranked bottom 3rd in league in offensive rating, right? So they tend to rely more on individualism versus collective cohesiveness as a team. And what I mean by that is they rely on the brilliance of, say, a Franz Wagner on his own, or a Paolo Banchero on his own, or a Desmond Bane on his own. But the issue is that they haven't figured out how to collectively combine those into a winning team. And you can't win basketball games, especially when you talk about the playoffs, when you're allowing guys to go out there and be brilliant on their own, but not in a unit. And that's the difference when you look at when they go against the Detroit Pistons team, for example, who, especially in Game 7, figured out a way to play collectively as a unit. You had Kate Cunningham, you had Tobias Harris, Jalen Duren stepped up. It is something that has plagued the Orlando Magic, specifically in this regular season. And I don't know if that's fully on the coach. I don't know if that's fully on the front office. For me, it's a matter of guys on the floor have to be able to play together, and I think some of that responsibility falls on the individual players. Yes, you as a head coach have to take what's on your roster and figure out how to make it work, and in that aspect, Jamahl Mosley failed at his job. The front office, though, has to be looked at and said, maybe the pieces that we have on the floor do not work together in the way that we need them to. They may work on paper, but that doesn't translate to the game. And if that is the case, which it looked like in this offseason, or rather this postseason, the front office failed at their job. And I go back to what I'm saying about Paolo Banchero. Paolo has not taken the leaps and strides in his career as what we think can be a bona fide superstar in this league and the leader of the Orlando Magic in the way that he needs to. He still doesn't have a mid-range game that is reliant. He still doesn't have a three-point game that is reliant. And at some point, the finger has to be blamed at the guy who you put so much faith in that he can lead this Orlando Magic team as to what are you doing or not doing in the offseason that you're not taking these next strides in your career. The unfortunate reality is that that conversation will happen after you change the head coach. I do not think that Jamahl Mosley is fully at fault for what transpired. I think that he is the easiest piece to remove, especially when you talk about the fact that he has lost the locker room, allegedly, that Paolo Banchero is not his biggest fan, allegedly. But let's call a spade a spade. Everything cannot be put on the head coach. He is not out there playing the game. He's not out there missing 23 shots in a row. And at some point, whoever you put in his position has to know without a shadow of a doubt that this roster is a roster he can win with. And I don't know if that's what this Orlando Magic roster is.
The Magic, of course, one of those young teams, maybe need a veteran leader to come in. That's a decision for the next head coach. Of course, we will get to that on the other side of this break. Speaking of those coaches there, we'll continue. But on the other side, you see the carousel continues. The Bulls, Pelicans, and now the Magic looking for their next head guy after Mosley going out there. On the other side, we got a bunch of names out there. Some names we've been talking about for weeks leading up to maybe the past couple of days. Some names that you might love, hate, but we will see on the other side. Ashley will continue this coverage with us next.